I don't know if this is attributable to work that some of the progressives who were basically endorsing Biden staying in the race did or not. Certainly, there were things like getting rid of medical debt and a 5% basically national cap on rent. Um, but this is good. This is good. Now, let me make it clear. The way that our politics work, for the most part, is that ideas have to be introduced. Ideas have to sit on the shelf. They have to have an imprimatur. They have to make it easier for people to accept and to buy into and move forward. And these things are not going to happen anytime soon. Not inconceivable that if there's like 52 Democratic senators in 2025 and there's, the Democrats control the House and there's a President Kamala Harris, that this wouldn't happen. That's actually conceivable, but it's much harder to imagine there's going to be 52 senators, et cetera, et cetera. However, and you also should be aware that Alina Kagan just last week in a talk, and I don't know where it was, came out in favor of an ethics code that was enforceable. Her idea was to have John Roberts create a team of lower court judges who would make assessments and dole out, punishments, as it were, or assess whether there was violations of ethics code. Joe Biden announced, it was anticipated, that there would be, that he wants to introduce Supreme Court reforms and would sign these bills. And again, this is one of the oldest living institutionalists in U.S. government. He writes in a statement, I don't know if he wrote it, but someone wrote in his name, "We have had term limits for presidents for nearly 75 years. We should have the same for Supreme Court justices. The United States is the only major constitutional democracy that gives lifetime seats to high court. Term limits would help ensure that the court's membership changes with some regularity. That would make timing for court nominations more predictable and less arbitrary. It would reduce the chance that any single presidency radically alters the makeup of the court for generations to come. I support a system in which the president would appoint a justice every 2 years to spend 18 years in active service on the Supreme Court." I think it's a great idea. The idea that we have 9 unelected justices and it's all by chance. Had Ginsburg not died 3 weeks before the presidency, the presidential election in 2020, a 51-year established individual right in this country probably would not have been reversed. That's just absurd that it just came to somebody dying in October instead of December. It's just absurd.
Yeah. It's also widely popular. Supreme Court term limits, I think, polls in the 70s in terms of how people feel about it. So there's no downside to it. What is the mechanism that he's describing? Is it through a constitutional amendment?
Well, that you could do with statutorily, I believe.
You can.
Yeah, I don't think I don't think that there is a lifetime requirement in the Constitution. I don't believe. Is there? Does the Constitution say lifetime appointment to the Supreme Court? I don't think so. The
only reason I ask is because the isn't the term limits for president a constitutional amendment?
I don't know. Maybe it is. I don't know. Maybe you'd have to amend the Constitution for that one. Third, I'm calling for a binding code of conduct on the Supreme Court. That is also just statutory.
Yeah.
The court's current voluntary ethics code is weak and self-enforced. Justice should be required to disclose gifts, refrain from public political activity, and recuse themselves from cases in which they or their spouses.
Looking at you, Clarence.
Yep. Every other federal judge is bound by an enforceable code of conduct. There's no reason for the Supreme Court to be exempt. And then he also, in the same statement, called for a constitutional amendment called the No One is Above the Law Amendment. This one is highly political. It would make it clear there's no immunity for crimes for a former president committed while in office. I share our founders' belief that the president's power is limited, not absolute. We are a nation of laws. So there you have it. This is good stuff at the very least. Very least.
Putting it on the table.
Yes.
I think the lifetime appointment thing would probably have to be a constitutional amendment, or the term limited thing, because of how it's been interpreted. So, look, I'm happy Biden's putting it on the table, but the code of ethics, that could be done statutorily is my guess. And so why not?
Shabiri says, shall hold offices during a good behavior has been read to mean lifetime in the Constitution.
Right.
So that's Article 3.
Being alive is good behavior. Okay.
Yes, there you go. Having these ideas, regardless of what they are, because frankly, I would like also to see 13 justices, which might have the same impact, frankly, in terms of like spreading out, not as
concentrated.
But having the idea of Supreme Court reform on the table, again, it provides room for people to promote Supreme Court reforms. Now, I also happen to think that you get pretty close on some of these constitutional amendments for the Supreme Court. You'd have to introduce it probably when the court is closer to 5-4 Democratic. But I think if you put in 13 justices, which is the number of appellate courts that we have, which is where the number 9 came from when we had 9 appellate courts, you'd see a lot more willingness from a bunch of states to impose term limits, which I think is a good idea. Now, I know you do not need a constitutional amendment to expand the size of the Supreme Court. That is statutory. So we'll see. You open the door to Supreme Court reforms. You open the door to Supreme Court reforms.
Hey, let's just have the conversation. Keep it up there.
Exactly. Hey, folks, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and check out our daily show. We do it every day at 12 p.m. Eastern for about 2.5 hours. We even take phone calls. You should check that out.